Many of us in the United States, not just those of us who are professional economists, or for that matter, professors of economics and so on, many other people, a much broader group, are coming more and more to the conclusion that we don't just have economic problems, we don't just have difficulties, we don't just have issues, that we now face a full blown systemic problem or set of problems that are interacting and aggravating one another. And it's that which has become the central focus or theme, if you like, of our discussions, both public and private. So let me go through a few of them to convey not only the particular points, but some of the spirit of discussion here. So we begin with a central fact, crucial to everything, which is that the United States, over the 20th century, now 25 years behind us, was a period of time in which, at least in the United States, we congratulated ourselves on having overcome class divisions. And by that was generally meant that we were a huge, vast, successfully middle class society. Yes, we had a few people very wealthy for historical reasons or because they were great actresses or whatever. And we had a few very poor people, that's true, but they were marginal. And what was the core of the United States was a vast middle class, which had an enviable standard of living, had its own home in most cases, its own automobile or more than one, the ability to send children to college, university, to take a vacation, a whole lot of signs of a vast middle. So that, for example, in the 60s and 70s, it was very common to read yet another article or read yet another book or hear yet another politician or business leader give a speech on the 4th of July, our Independence Day, about what a fantastic success we were, how exceptional the United States was, and it was this big, vast middle class that was proof positive that we were the success that led us to congratulate ourselves in that way. Well, for the last 40 years, as every statistical series maintained either by the government or by universities or by private statistical services will attest, we have destroyed that middle class. We are now a society not only split between the rich and everybody else, and by the rich, I mean the top 10% and everybody else, but we are riven by the consciousness of it all. That is, it's on everyone's mind. It is obvious. I'll give you just one of countless examples. In the last few weeks, we have finally passed the governmental budget for the coming years, and the one that President Trump called a big, beautiful bill. Well, I won't bore you with the details. It's a bill that's many hundreds of pages long. But the bottom line of that bill, which is what has mostly drawn public attention, is that it perpetuates tax cuts passed initially in the first presidency of Mr. Trump, back in the declining weeks of 2017. Those were supposed to expire at the end of this year. The new bill perpetuates them, cancels their expiration, and adds a whole new set of additional tax cuts, overwhelmingly for corporations and the richest 10%. And this at a time when the United States' deficit, and I want to remind everyone that the United States is the world's largest debtor country right now, and is adding right now to that debt by the trillions with a T annually, and that this new bill will continue doing that for the next decade unless it is amended. This is an extraordinarily deep division in our society, producing all the things that unequal distributions of wealth always produce: bitterness, regret, envy, hostility. And I mean that from the rich towards those falling below them, and among the mass at the bottom looking up at the rich. This is a country that therefore has cheered the disintegration of Elon Musk and his position, because he exemplified literally in himself the extraordinary wealth that existed, and that can, when it self-destructs, bring cheers from those who are mere spectators. Number two, the effort of this government to deal with a debt problem that is already very scary. Our national debt is much above our GDP, but trying to deal with the fact that it is this government currently making the deficit of this already over-indebted country even worse, seeking to offset some of that by imposing tariffs, and then you have to take a deep breath, on everyone else in the world. And as I am taking a breath, it is extraordinary. The problems of the United States, the president says, are going to be solved by hurting or hoping to hurt every other country. Because a tariff, if you understand the economics of it, a tariff is paid first and foremost by an American importing company. That is who gets billed for the tariff. Our leaders are fond of referring to tariffs as the tariff on China, or the tariff on the EU, or the tariff on Britain. But the tariff is not on them. That is a carefully designed political misspeaking. The tariff is paid by an American importing corporation. Now, of course, that corporation will do everything in its power to handle the tariff cost the way it handles every other cost that arises, by either passing it on to the final consumer in a higher price, which would then mean inflation in the United States, or going back to the country from which the imports come and begging them to lower their prices and to thereby help the importing company make that tariff payment that Uncle Sam requires. In other words, squeeze the American consumer or squeeze the rest of the world in order to help the United States. That's what this program is. And what it has done is break, in an important way, the entire post-World War II global political alignment. It is now well known that some of the worst hurt by all this are our closest allies. The deal made with Japan last week, the threats hanging over the relationship between the United States on the one hand and its two major trading partners, Canada and Mexico, on the other. These are now destroyed alliances. Canadians are not taking their tourist time in the United States the way they once did. The damage to them, the damage to the American tourism industry, incalculable and growing as I speak to you. A broken set of alignments and alliances at the same time that the United States wants to mobilize those same countries to join it in tilting against the other new power block in the world economy, which is the People's Republic of China and the careful alliances it is building around the BRICS countries. This is a self-contradictory program. Those alliances are being strained to the breaking point. They're not being strengthened. It's the opposite that's happening to them. That's why the EU is having meetings with the Chinese. That's why the Canadians are working overtime to find Chinese markets for what they used to send to the United States, and on and on and on. These are unspeakable self-destructions. And I'll give you one last example. I don't want to speak too long at one time. I'm going to give you the example of the electric vehicle. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, a competition emerged. And it was a competition in which virtually all of the world's automobile companies participated. It had to do with the transition from fossil fuel run automobiles, petroleum, gasoline, and all of that, and the transition to electrically powered vehicles, cars and trucks.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the What the Finance podcast. On this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming back Professor Richard Wolff. Richard is well known, sort of looking at alternative economic systems. He's the host of the Economic Update and founding director of Democracy at Work. So Richard, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Glad to be here, Anthony.